actually.
That's okay. I'll tell Elizabeth. Excuse me, everyone. We've got a few technical issues here, so we're going to be about 5 to 7 minutes delayed. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're here for the meeting of Audit and Finance Standing Committee of June 22nd, 2026. My name is Kathy Daigle-Gemin. I am the Chair of Audit and Finance. I'm with District 1, Waverley Fall River, Musquodoboit Valley. So we'll call the meeting to order and do our land acknowledgement that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Supporting us today is Jerry Blackwood, the Executive Director of Finance and Asset Management, and our Chief Financial Officer, John Traves. To my right, our Municipal Solicitor and Chief Governance Officer, our Legislative Assistant is Elizabeth McDonald, and our Team Lead Legislative Assistant is Krista Vining. We have a full house today. The voting members of Audit and Finance Standing Committee are Vice Chair, Councillor Jean St. Amand, Councillor David Hensby, Councillor Billy Gillis, Councillor Sean Cleary, and we have regrets from Councillor Morse. So our first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of May 13th, 2026. Vice Chair St. Amand, and seconded by Councillor Gillis. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hands. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you. Approval of the order of business and the approval of additions and deletions. Do we have any call for changes to the order of business? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion, please. Councillor Gillis, seconded by Vice Chair Councillor St. Amand. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hands. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Business arising out of the minutes, there are none. A call for a declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Motions of reconsideration, there are none. Motions of rescission, there are none. Consideration of deferred business, there is none. Notice of tabled matters, there is none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Madam Clerk, do we have any correspondence received?
No correspondence has been received from the clerk's office.
And any petitions?
No petitions have been received.
Thank you very much. And we have no presentations. Public participation. As of 10:30 on Monday, June 22nd, today, there were no registered speakers for this meeting, and therefore there are no public participations also via Zoom. But we will ask if there are anyone in the gallery 3 times that would like to speak. So for the first time, is there anyone from the gallery that would like to speak? For the second time, is there anyone from the gallery that would wish to speak? And for the third and final time, if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to speak. Seeing none, we will then move on to information items brought forward. There are none. We move to reports. 13.1, the Auditor General. 13.1.1 is the capital budget audit. Now, while there is no presentation for this report, there is a presentation for the report, sorry. Andrew Atherton, our Municipal Auditor General, will deliver the presentation, and Limi Lee will be available also to support and answer any questions. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. Let me just start my slides. Okay, I'm going to start today by talking about our audit of capital budgeting. Before I get into it, I'd like to thank my team and all the folks that we worked with across the municipality to complete this audit. I know Crystal's here today, and I actually have Limei Lee, who was the audit manager for this audit. She's with me, and if your questions get too detailed or complicated, I will ask Limei to bail me out. I'm going to take a little different approach today, at least compared to my usual style of jumping right into the details. We had some challenges in getting what I would call buy-in for the results on this one. So I'm going to take you through the thinking behind the audit, what we were expecting a little bit, and before we talk about what we found. So before I get to that though, let me just clarify one thing. I did have some issues with how management received our recommendations, and we certainly found some areas requiring improvement. But I don't want any of you to think that that means the folks responsible for your capital budgeting are not working hard to put it together. From the project managers across the municipality up through executive directors and ultimately to Crystal and Jerry and the team at Finance and Asset Management, they're working really hard to build your budget and answer your questions. Our audit findings are intended to show how this effort could be perhaps adjusted to lead to a more transparent and supported budget. All right, you can see we had 2 objectives for the audit. Basically, we wanted to see that there was a solid administrative process behind the scenes, and we wanted to see there was evidence supporting the cost estimates for each project and for the final prioritization decisions. Supporting those objectives, and this is the case for every one of our audits, we have a list of more detailed criteria, which if those are met, they help to ensure that the objectives are met. At a high level, I'll walk through these quickly. Roles and responsibilities should be clearly defined. Policies, procedures, frameworks, and other tools should exist and be used. Cost estimates should be supported. Assumptions should be reasonable and documented. Prioritization should be based on clear criteria. And final recommendations to council should be based on those prioritization results. All of the above were agreed to by management before we started our work. And I would suggest they're a pretty basic list of expectations for what should exist to support the capital budget that gets presented annually to all of you. Staff and management should know what their jobs are. They should have adequate tools and direction on how to do them. The dollar amounts you're approving should have clear support behind them, and assumptions made around things like inflation and contingency amounts should be supported. Finally, the decisions around which projects are recommended to you should be made in a clear and supported manner. You can see the responses to our recommendations in our report. Management have agreed to all 9. There are places where the detailed work is a little bit thin, in my opinion. Now, I'll leave it to all of you if you want to ask for more details on what is planned and when it will happen. But I'm hopeful that with your support and direction, management will recognize the importance of a fully supported and transparent capital budget, and will work towards achieving that by implementing our recommendations. Okay, that's enough background summary stuff. Let's get into the details. I'm going to start with the governance structure, which did not adequately support the overall process. While a structure was in place during our audit, we found many key responsibilities were not being fulfilled. We found limited evidence of corporate level discussions on priorities and trade-offs, and we could not determine how information and input from staff across HRM was used in final prioritization decisions. In fact, the chair of the working group that is intended to be responsible for this noted the group does not rank, prioritize, or formally recommend projects up to senior leadership. Now, I should clarify, we focused on just the 25-26 capital budget for this audit, and management tells us that things were a little bit different for that year. And I am fine with the premise that a new process has been approved and won't be formally rolled out until a new CAO is hired, but I don't believe that should change the kind of things we were looking for. No matter the system in place, staff need support and clear direction when preparing the budgets. I will also note that people in the business units that we talked to expressed a more general concern about lack of direction and clarity, as opposed to specifically about the 25-26 budget year. So creating a new system of governance won't address that on its own. Management needs to ensure the new approach addresses these concerns in order to make a difference. So we had 3 recommendations in this area. Clarify roles and responsibilities at the governance level. Ensure direction and oversight is provided corporate-wide on the budgeting process. And update the framework to define roles and responsibilities in the prioritization process. Management have agreed to them all and believe that the new governance structure is going to help address them. As I said, a new structure won't do it alone, but hopefully it will provide the basis to make needed changes to improve the system. Okay, moving on to cost estimates, and you'll recall our criteria in this section were fairly straightforward. There should be clear support for cost estimates, and key assumptions used should be documented and reasonable. You can see the results in our section. Neither of these were consistently met. I'm disappointed in the fact that the $300 million plus capital budget that you approved cannot be traced back to clear support. The project manager responsible for each project should already have the details on how they came up with the overall project cost. No matter the size, every project basically comes down to materials and labor required. Support could be as basic as a spreadsheet with explanations showing how the costs were calculated and on what basis. Certainly, given the timing of these estimates, some level of contingency will always exist. But again, that should be supported. How is each figure determined? All of that should be documented to support the final estimate that all of you are working with in determining your final capital budget. You can see on this slide that in half of the new project costs and 2/3 of the carry forward costs that we looked at, there was not enough information for my team to reproduce the figures included in the budget that you folks approved. We also found poor documentation of assumptions used in half the files we tested. By their very nature, estimates of what these projects will cost involve making a number of assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. Often those assumptions involve extensive professional judgment by the folks responsible for them. We get that. But those assumptions and judgments should be clearly documented so any of you can easily see and understand what factors were used. Perhaps not surprising due to the gaps I've already discussed, we found little evidence of quality review of the estimates and assumptions. This led to various approaches to something as simple as calculating the net HST that was included in the estimates. Management have expressed concerns that they require an improved information system to facilitate that kind of support. Now, I take a little bit of issue with that thinking, because with or without a system, adequate support for figures used in the budget should exist, and basic monitoring to ensure they do is not asking a lot. I certainly understand a newer system would probably make it easier, maybe save staff time, money, and headaches. But it can also be addressed as easily as implementing a checklist to be completed at a business unit level to ensure that everything has been done as it's supposed to be. We have a couple of recommendations in this section. First, to set some minimum expectations for cost estimates, and then to create a quality review process for those estimates. The final area I will focus on is how projects get evaluated and prioritized. Obviously, management makes many decisions along the way, and in the end, present their recommended projects to all of you for consideration in the 10-year capital plan. We understand there are a lot of factors that go into those decisions, and never expected it to be a simple scoring process whereby the top, let's say 100 scored projects get put forward to you. There's a lot more happening than that. But we still believe there should be a more transparent evaluation and prioritization process to show which projects management is recommending and why. From there, it would be up to all of you to make final decisions. Now, we found some evidence of evaluation throughout the process, but there was a lack of support around how those were completed. And in the end, we could not link those evaluations consistently to the final projects proposed to you. Management explained that many factors have to be considered. For instance, maybe there's some federal or provincial money available for one project and not another, and therefore that has to be prioritized. We fully agree with that. No questions. We're simply looking to see that that is documented and that rationale supports final decisions. In the end, we made two recommendations here to implement minimum documentation requirements around the rationale behind evaluations, and second, to clarify how those evaluations are expected to inform final prioritization decisions. We had two other recommendations, both in what I would say somewhat administrative in nature and fairly self-explanatory. One is to update the working group's terms of reference, and the other to improve the records maintained from that working group's meetings. Okay, we ended up with 9 recommendations. Management have agreed to implement all of them, and we'll be back in roughly 18 months to revisit and hopefully see progress towards a more supported and transparent capital budget. So with that, I will turn it over to all of you and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. To the members of the Audit and Finance Committee, because we have a full house here, do you mind if we just go on the order list instead of prioritizing just the committee members to go first? Consensus there? Thank you so much. Then Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First things first, I'm going to ask for Committee of the Whole. Or is everybody good with us moving to Committee of the Whole rules?
So a seconder for Committee of the Whole rules? Deputy Mayor Cuddle, thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Nay? Motion is approved. Thank you. We will engage Committee of the Whole rules.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate you coming forward here and speaking today. I certainly appreciate all of the recommendations and all the work that you've done. One of the things that, well, there are a number of things that I think about when I listen to these recommendations and the recommendations that we have, as council, have put forward. The number one being the affordability piece. I was kind of, my question to you is that how have all of these projects been shaped based off of the feedback that you shared or that you heard and that you've since shared, is reflected in our commitment to affordability? Because I feel like that would be the single driving factor coming from this council. Thank you.
So our audit was focused on the processes that were in place, not looking specifically at whether a factor such as affordability was considered, simply looking to ensure to see that the processes were followed, which then would lead to, if affordability is a key priority for council, then that would carry through. But we didn't look into the detailed approval or denial, I guess for lack of a better word, of any specific projects. So I really can't speak to how affordability was factored in.
Right, so you were just looking for criteria.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. My question has to do with the cost estimate. I mean, that is something that we certainly struggle with, year over year. Often we'll see a capital project escalate in cost over, between the time when it was decided that we were going to do it versus the time we're going to implement it. So I'm just wondering, when you were looking at the cost estimate process, if you could provide a little bit more context. And I see that you did a kind of a survey, Public Works, Property and Fleet, like amongst some of the business units. But I'm just curious about the nature of the projects that you audited. And like, were they multi-year projects? Were they one-off projects? Were they, related to kind of infrastructure? I'm just wondering a little bit more about the nature, because this is, I know this is something many people are struggling to get a grasp on, as prices seem to fluctuate with inflation, with labor shortages, with timing. Cost escalation is a huge issue, and how do we do better with that? But maybe by providing some context on what you actually surveyed would be helpful.
We looked broadly at different types of projects. We would have looked at things that were multi-year, at some that were smaller. We looked at multiple business units. We didn't look at the accuracy of the cost estimates. We didn't try to get in and question how they were created. We focused on, was there enough evidence to support them? Now, that said, we do have another audit coming up that's going to get a little more into the actual implementation, the making the projects happen, and looking at how well that's happening. So that will go a little further down there. In terms of the escalation over time and the changing estimates, for me, that gets back to the assumptions and making sure that those are supported and reasonable. And all they can be is the best effort of the team at the point in time that they make it. Obviously, things change, but ensuring that those assumptions have been properly documented and that they are reasonable, then that's as good as we can do at the start, and then see how it goes from there. But we will be digging into that a little further as we go forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cuddle. Vice Chair St. Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where your focus has been so laser focused on the process, I have a question relating to the process of a couple of the subcategories of projects that you looked at. So there were 12 capital projects reviewed in terms of their cost estimates. 6 of those were capital renewal, and of those, 5 of them lacked a standard, at least as far as you were concerned, on a condition assessment that would have justified the capital that was assigned to that renewal project. So I'm wondering where, because that wasn't singled out in one of your recommendations, it was lumped in with the capital estimates. I'm curious to get your perspective on whether or not we were lacking in a systemic process to enable ongoing, on a rolling basis, condition assessments of the assets that then have to be renewed. Because if we've got a gap there, we have a lot of assets, and that asset inventory is only growing over time. So if we don't course correct and ensure that we have an audit trail available to us for that capital renewal cost allocation, the gap is only going to get wider over time. And so while I can appreciate that it's all lumped into a specific recommendation around capital estimates, I just wondered if you could speak to that specific aspect of capital renewal.
So you're putting me in a tough spot here, Councillor, because I literally just read the findings from the next audit I'll be reporting yesterday, which are going to talk a lot about this issue.
Okay.
Which is also partially why we don't have a specific recommendation around that here. Our focus here was on the estimates. And we will have, we have an audit that's looking at that in great detail, and will be coming out sometime in the fall. So
Okay.
it is important. I do agree, and we touched on it here because it was something that we saw, but we didn't look into it in detail because we knew we were doing another audit that was going to look at that a little more.
Right. So we know it's formally on your radar one way or the other as a component piece of what we're
It's well on
examining
its
now.
way.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sinemond. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up on the no documented rationale for evaluation results. And one thing I found interesting in this section of your report, it notes that the project managers were not sharing the evaluation results with their business unit management. So I guess what I'm wondering is this a lack of, is this just a lack of documentation, perhaps due to time constraints for resources, or is it information is not flowing? And because the information is not flowing, perhaps we're not making the best decisions because the material's not documented, it's not reproducible, perhaps business units are not talking, things are not in alignment. I don't know. So I'm wondering how important this lack of documentation is. Maybe you can comment on that.
So as an auditor, obviously we're looking for documentation. That's, if it's not documented, we can't prove that it happened. Therefore, our standards say it didn't happen. There's more to it than that, obviously. There's a lot to this. I'm looking for a rationale for why. Which projects are going to move forward, which projects a business unit has decided are their important ones. There's communication of that. That's moving up. It's the why that's missing. And where I get a little concerned about it, looking on page 14, the second last paragraph. So when funding constraints require adjustment, senior leadership contact individual executive directors to identify projects within their business units that could be deferred. That's very silo based. That's within the business unit. Okay, we need to save $1 million, so let's go to business unit X and see what they can do. And I'm looking to have a good rationale of, okay, well, why are we doing these ones? What should we be important? If we need to save $1 million, where can we do that and have the least impact? So there is definitely, this was one of the areas that we had the most challenge in working through it, because we just could not see how those decisions were being made. And we're looking to have that a little more clear so that if any of you ask that type of question, you can get the same answer.
Okay, yes, and when you read that sentence, you said executive directors, they're not relying on those evaluation results either. They're just pulling it out of the air. Okay. One other thing I did want to note, the report also highlights some best practices in some units, and that those best practices are now going to be adopted. So I did just want to point that one out as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, I was wondering, we were talking about prioritization of projects. Like, we have a new strategic plan now. Is there ways to tell that our projects are being prioritized according to that plan versus maybe 10 years ago something was important to a council? Like, how do we have faith that our current strat plan is driving prioritization?
I think that, Councillor, that gets to the heart of my concerns with documentation around the rationale for decisions that are made so that we can make those links. Right now, we struggle to make the links between individual project evaluations that may have been done by a project manager, and how those flow through to you. And the same, it works in the other direction. How can we tie your priorities through to what is being presented to you? And that's all part and parcel of what I'm looking for in terms of a better documented capital budget, so that it becomes more clear how those are connected.
Okay, thanks for your work on this.
Thank you, Councillor White. Mayor Fillmore.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you both, Auditor General, for your work here. Two quick questions for you. The council is preparing to invest, in round numbers, just this side of $2 billion in capital over the next 4 years. I think the number is $1.85 billion. And that is, those investments are going to be absolutely critical in how we face the growth opportunities that are coming our way. In looking at the report, there are a couple things that stand out. Inconsistencies in our capital cost estimates, gaps in how we prioritize projects across the organization, and troubling disconnect between internal evaluation results and what is ultimately recommended to council. So if you were going to advise us on the best way to meet the moment that we're in, which of our internal processes should we be focusing our immediate efforts on? Where's the burning, where's the fire?
I've said many times, all of my recommendations are created equal, and I love them all the same, just like my children. As an accountant, the cost estimates concern me. The inconsistency, the inability to clearly trace from what's put forward to you folks back to how that was developed. I think that in the assumptions, given the nature of what we're dealing with, that these are estimates, so the assumptions are huge to have a good plan on that. I think from your perspective, the prioritization is very important, so that you can, going back to Councillor White's question, that you can see how things are being connected. And all of that is then supported by the governance structure. If we put a good structure in place and we have the processes so that staff know what's expected, and there's clear accountability there, clear expectations, I think all of that will work together. So there I've wrapped all of my recommendations in to say I think we need to do all 9 and work on that.
Okay, thank you. And if I may carry on, Madam Chair, I see as well in the report that management talked about the fact that progress on your recommendations may be constrained without integrated systems such as the ERP asset accounting system, and you've talked about that in your presentation. Thank you for that. I just want to get a sense of scale here. Like, is that the issue, or are there bigger things at work here, like broader challenges around capital planning practices or governance, or you've mentioned documentation? So I just want to be careful we're not ensmallening the problem by just talking about the ERP, and what else is at play.
I will always take exception when an auditee says that they need to have a new system in order to do X, Y, or Z. We didn't always have systems, but we should always have had good governance and good support for things. I think that is part of it. I have not done an audit on exactly what they would expect to use that system for and what benefits it would bring. I would hope that would be bringing that system forward is in fact a capital project that maybe needs to be in the capital budget, and the rationale behind its prioritization maybe needs to be flagged a little better. It obviously won't have the same appeal to repaved streets or new baseball fields or cricket fields or, well, curling rinks, if I can be personal. But maybe it's really important behind the scenes, and it's incumbent on the administration to show that to all of you of what the benefits will be, of how that will help going forward, in whether it's in implementing these recommendations or, more importantly, in making the budget, the capital budgets of the future, work a little bit better.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Fillmore. I see no other names on the list. May I ask a question from the chair? Thank you, Andrew, for the report. One of the things I was curious about is it's the 2025-26 capital budget year, which was a very interesting year for our budget discussions, and where the report talks about having the right information coming to the council. Did you also overlook to see what the timeline between our budget discussion and council's direction to staff and how that impacted maybe estimates and a gap in timelines? I'm just curious about that. And then the other thing is that in the report, it notes about transitioning to a new system and the implications of that new system while they're doing the transition and where that might fit.
So we did not look at the timelines between council direction or anything on that front, so I can't really speak to that. And as opposed to a new system, we're talking about a new governance process. And as I understand it, that is well prepared, it's well ready to go. But with the perhaps imminent change, I'm not sure what the timing is of allowing Mr. Anguish to retire and bringing in a full-time permanent CAO. I understand why management wants to wait and allow the new CAO to have their 2 cents worth on that process before it gets implemented. And then once that happens, it'll be incumbent on the CAO and the senior leadership and management across the municipality to make it work.
Thank you. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just have one quick question, and when I look again at your recommendations, these things all feel net new, if I could look at it that way. So my question is that have you ever done an audit of this kind? Are you asking for process and documentation that has never existed?
I can't speak to what has existed historically in HRM. I have certainly done capital budgeting audits at the provincial level, and we did see some of the documentation. There were good practices identified in the Public Works Department in particular, where there were areas where some of this was being done really well. And I can't remember exactly which recommendation it was, but one of the recommendations the response references using those good practices that already exist and building on those for everyone else. And that's exactly the sort of thing that we want, and that's what we're looking for when we do one of these audits that crosses multiple business units. We always, when we're doing our planning for these audits, one of the questions I want to make sure gets asked is, who's doing this well? Which business unit could we go look at where we might get some good practices that would help others who say, oh, man, I can't do that. Well, okay, they're doing it here, so yes, you can do it. So I don't think this is completely new. It's not outlandishly new. There are absolutely people doing some of these pieces, maybe some people doing a lot of these pieces across the municipality already.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hartling. And my apologies, Mr. Mayor. I neglected to say that the mayor is ex officio and a voting member on the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. So make sure I got that clear. Thank you. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have a quick question of clarification. In your opening remarks, you mentioned something, and maybe I misunderstood. You mentioned there was something about issues with how the results were received. Can you delve into that a bit? Or because then based on the rest of your comments, you said that management accepted your recommendations. So there seemed to be a bit of conflict between that, what I think was an opening statement, and then the report. So maybe you can help me understand.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, yes, management has accepted all 9 recommendations. We had some challenges in getting there. So I was just alluding to that and wanted to make sure as a result that I went back through the basics behind what we did and why we did it and what we were looking for. But yes, at this point, management has agreed to all 9, and they have, to more or less level of detail, indicated what they're going to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that unfolds over the next 18 months, and then we'll come back and see where we stand.
So there's nothing further that we as councillors and mayors should know about those challenges. It was okay.
Yes, you're good. Read the responses. If you're not content with what you see in the response, if it doesn't give you enough details to say that you know, to be comfortable, with what management's intentions are, then I would encourage you to reach out to management and ask them those questions of what are you planning to do for this recommendation or that recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. I see no other names on the list, so we will conclude this agenda item and move on to 13.1.2, which is Office of the Mayor Expense Audit. And on this one, it does say that there is no presentation, but that our AG, Andrew Atherton and Liam Lee, are here to answer any questions. Mr. Auditor, did you want to have any opening remarks at all?
I do have a short presentation without slides, shall we say. Okay, so moving on to my second audit to report on today. This one took a look at some expenses from the mayor's office. It was not part of our original audit plan, but came to us through concerns identified by senior management within the municipality about some transactions which originated in the mayor's office. I decided we would dig into these 4 transactions quickly this spring. Now, since that time, we have decided to add a full procurement audit to our schedule, but I still wanted to report these 4 at the earliest opportunity. As you can see, we found all 4 transactions were non-compliant with HRM's procurement policy. I'll talk through each one quickly. So the first 2 are both for external legal services obtained by the mayor. The first was an invoice for just over $1,400, was received in June of 2025. The mayor's office did not consult with procurement or the municipal solicitor before engaging a law firm. The procurement policy is clear that approval is required from the municipal solicitor to engage external counsel. When the invoice came in and the mayor's staff attempted to process it, senior management became aware and got involved. Ultimately, the municipal solicitor approved the expense, as I'll call it a kind of a one-time exception. He sent an email to the mayor's office providing that approval and including a reminder that authorization was required for any future external legal expenses. In November, the mayor's office received further external legal advice, and again, no approval was obtained to use external counsel. When the invoice was received, the mayor's chief of staff approved it for payment. The invoice, for just over $6,000, was coded as other goods and services rather than legal services. It was processed by so the invoice, the $6,000 invoice, was processed by municipal accounts payable staff for payment despite the lack of the municipal solicitor approval. Payment was made in December, and senior management did not become aware of that second payment until early in 2026. Once aware, the acting CAO told the mayor that he needed to reimburse both amounts, and the mayor complied. Management has indicated that they have provided additional training for accounts payable staff to reinforce the need for approval of any legal services invoices and provided procurement training for staff within the mayor's office. So that's the story on the legal invoices. Up next was bringing on an HR firm to assist the mayor's office with tasks such as updating job descriptions and eventually hiring staff to fill vacancies. The initial value of this contract was $50,000, and procurement was completed using an alternative procurement approach in which a contract is negotiated directly with one supplier rather than using a competitive approach. There were various discussions between procurement staff and the mayor's office in setting up this arrangement. Ultimately, procurement staff refused to sign off on using an alternative procurement approach, indicating they believed a competitive approach should be used. Staff also indicated they felt the mayor's office had a clear preference from the start for a single vendor. Eventually, the now former CAO and current CFO signed off on the alternative procurement form, citing confidentiality as the reason it was necessary. Now, you can read the description of when confidentiality can be used as a justification in our report, but I'll just say it just doesn't fit in this situation. The work was to redesign job descriptions, assess the overall structure of the mayor's office, and then to provide support during recruitment and hiring. None of that involves confidential information. And frankly, none of that is anything more than what I might call typical HR type work. It is clear to my office that this contract should have followed a competitive procurement approach to ensure the best value was obtained for the money spent. And we did identify one additional issue with the HR consultant process connected to a change in the scope of work. Originally, this was planned for just over $50,000, and the final bill was for just over $90,000. While the final invoice was properly approved and payment of it was reasonable, the work had been done, there should have been a contract amendment when it became apparent additional work was going to be required. That would have given the municipality the opportunity to ensure the new work was necessary and monitor to see that it was completed as intended. I will note that that amendment was properly presented to the Audit and Finance Standing Committee by the acting CAO in January of this year. So the final transaction we looked at related to bringing a speechwriter in to help the mayor with his 2025 State of the Municipality speech. This cost the municipality just over $14,000 and was also sourced without use of a competitive procurement approach. Instead, the mayor's staff reached out directly to a vendor and asked them to help. No contract or statement of work was used to define expectations. In the end, the vendor submitted an invoice for their services, and the mayor's office issued a check request to have it paid. The payment of the invoice was reasonable as the work was completed, but there are specific procurement approaches designed to cover just this sort of situation, and the mayor's office should have worked with the procurement department to figure out the best approach. So, while all four of these were non-compliant with policy, I am hopeful that subsequent training along with the lessons learned from this audit will help address that gap. I have chosen not to make any formal recommendation here. It would basically have been a comply with policy. But instead I'm going to wait for our broader procurement audit to assess any system-wide improvements that may be needed. At this point, I will cede the floor to all of you and do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. And Mayor Fillmore.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you again, Andrew. I just want to actually ask some advice of the solicitor here. I can't tell, John, if I'm in a conflict of interest situation here to speak on this item, and maybe I could just seek your guidance on that.
Mayor, it's a difficult position for me because I advise council, not individuals. So you would have to consider your position vis-a-vis whatever comes up, I suppose. There's no recommendation at the moment, so really it would depend on where this conversation goes, if anywhere, I would suggest. And so you need to consider whether or not at the end of the day, if there is a vote or if there's something that causes you to see that your interests, your personal interests diverge from those of council, then you might want to consider it at that time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that very much. So I'll just simply say, colleagues, I was very happy to cooperate fully with the Auditor General. We spoke on various occasions, and I think the report speaks for itself. There are no recommendations. However, we have proceeded with staff training, as has been suggested. And I would also note that the legal invoices have been repaid, and I think we are moving forward in a good way now. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fillmore. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Andrew, I just want to ask, if this audit wasn't done, would we as council have known of these results otherwise?
To my knowledge, certainly that with the legal services, I believe this is the first you're hearing of it, but I can't speak to what else might have happened if we hadn't audited. So it's a little beyond my ability to say what else could have happened if we hadn't undertaken the audit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew, you touched on the confidentiality piece related to the procurement of a consultant for the HR piece. And I'm just wondering, was there any reason given for confidentiality? I mean, you said you didn't think it met the measure, but I'm just wondering what the rationale was related to classifying this as confidential.
We did not get into what the thinking was at the time. We looked at the alternative procurement form and what was checked off on that as the justification, and we assessed whether there was anything confidential in the nature of what was done, and in my opinion, there was not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cuddle. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for your work on this. I wanted to ask about the legal expenses, because that's the one I'm personally having the most trouble with, just because it's, I mean, if I understand the timeline correctly, the first invoice went in, there was a bit of a pass given to, okay, well, don't do that again. They were told what the procedure was, and then submitted the second invoice with a different coding. I'm wondering, in the audit, you referenced these as at the end as that, you know, HRM, you know, we need to be paying valid expenses. What can you offer anything in terms of what these expenses are? Are these, do we consider these to be personal legal expenses?
Given the nature of legal expenses in general, we chose not to get into what they were beyond legal services. And given the clarity of the procurement policy that any external legal expenses require the municipal solicitor's approval, that was the end of the conversation for me. Okay, these were clearly not compliant. They shouldn't have been paid. So I'm not going to speak to what the details of those were. I don't think that's appropriate at this time.
So the conclusion, though, is the mayor has paid these back from his own personal funds, not HRM?
Yes, the mayor's paid HRM back for those expenses.
Okay. Has this piece, maybe there's not a delicate way to ask this, but did you interview the mayor's staff as to what the intent here was? Like, why was this coded other goods and services when it was legal?
We have interviewed the mayor's staff, but I can't provide any explanation of why that was done at the time. There was no clear, and I'm always hesitant to get too deep into why. My role is to present a report to you with the facts of the situation, and in this case, it's that we had 4 non-compliant transactions. Why somebody did something a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, I can't provide audit assurance over that sort of a why on what somebody was thinking, so I tend to stay away from that why where I can in my audits.
Have you referred the audit or senior staff to anyone else at this point?
Yes, I referred my concerns to Halifax Regional Police for a couple of these because I felt that this was a little past my comfort zone, and they felt a little too close to the situation, so they passed it along to the RCMP, and as I understand it, the RCMP are doing their investigation.
So to my original kind of question around intent, I guess that would be a police investigation then at this point?
I want to be careful. I have nothing to do with the police investigation, so
no, but like you don't cover that piece.
What you're saying is
Presumably
reasonable.
they would,
but I don't know, and I'm not going to speak for what they're going to do. That's their responsibility to get to the bottom of that, and they'll do their thing.
I think I'll come back, Mr. Chair. I need to sit with that for a second.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Kent.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks the committee for allowing me to ask these questions. not being a member. Andrew, the let's say the first one, invoice number 2. It says here that this was after they were out of line with the first one. Then the second one, they changed the code, so it was put under something else. It also says that management indicated to us that they've provided additional training to the staff. And in this case, who is the management? Is it the management of the mayor's office or the management of?
Okay, good question. In this case, my management refers to management of HRM, that they had endeavored to provide additional procurement training specifically to the mayor's staff and additional training to their accounts payable staff, expressly looking at the fact that external legal services required authorization of the municipal solicitor, just to make sure everybody.
And that included the chief of staff?
I'm not sure who received which pieces of training.
Okay, and in your opinion, having had that training, would it have been a reasonable assumption that the staff would have learned from that and then not subsequently gone forward and done the other, or perhaps they ignored it? This is where I'm getting at. That's where my thoughts are going.
The training would have been after the second one. There wasn't a large window between them. So the additional training presumably wouldn't have happened until later in the year. So,
but then there's further procurement issues following it. So it should have been a reasonable assumption that they could, they would have learned from that, I would assume.
well, I think all of these procurements are all happening around a similar time.
Okay.
Early in the mayor's tenure and in the transition to a new office, a separate office for the mayor.
Okay. And perhaps this question is for legal. Is council able to find out who these payments went to, or what agency or who, or is that an in-camera question? And do we have that right to learn that?
We'll bring that to our solicitor. Thank you,
Yep.
Councillor Kent.
Sorry, Madam Chair, through you to the councillor. Which payments, the legal payments or the?
The legal payments, the 90,000, any payments that were made in this that were then subsequently paid back.
The two legal payments which were paid by HRM were to 2 separate law firms
Okay.
that were retained, and
Consultants?
and the other I don't have the
You
names.
don't have it
but
available today? Is it something that we could have?
Yes,
And would that be in camera or?
I'd have to take a
discussion?
look at it. I don't see why
Okay.
it's
Okay,
particularly in
so-
camera. They would have been a public contract. They would be available. So yes.
Okay, so
all
is
of
that
those can be
something
made
that
available.
we can organize to
So,
get that?
yeah.
Please, thank you. Okay, I think that's it for me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I guess my first question is, regarding the scope of this report. It focuses on 4 specific transactions identified by senior staff, and they were evaluated against 2 criteria. So in the capital audit that we saw, I was looking at 6, right? So I'm looking to create some parity there. I understand that you are looking at a greater capital procurement audit later in the future, but my first question is that given the very narrow scope of what we're looking at today, can we expect a more comprehensive or exhaustive audit in the future? Or I guess what I'm essentially asking is this the final word, or will more details be coming forward?
In terms of these 4 transactions, this would be my final word. We will be doing a broader procurement audit across HRM that may or may not include the mayor's office. I've asked my team to consider what other procurements may have gone through that office to see whether there's enough there to warrant inclusion in that larger audit. But at the end of the day, I will defer to my team to figure out what is the right places to spend our time and effort. But for these four, yes, this is my final word. Non-compliant with the procurement policy, and really nothing further for me.
Okay, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartling, and our solicitor has a comment.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. So yes, we have named CFO Jerry can advise with respect to the names of the consultants. The law firms were Birchall, Wickwire, Bryson, and Stewart McKelvey. And Jerry, you have the others. But maybe before I go there, I just want to clarify something so there's no confusion in terms of Councillor Young's question as to whether this would become available. There was a internal administrative review which led to the direction to repay these monies and some other directions from the CAO, which was shared with the Auditor General by the CFO as well as the Chair of Audit and Finance. So that's, yes, Councillor Young, this would have become apparent one way or another. We wanted to take the time, or the CAO did, I understand, to allow the Auditor General to do his work once we understood there would be an audit of this. And Jerry, you had the two other.
Thank you, Jerry Blackwood, CFO. So the consultant was Hawthorne Consulting, and the speechwriter was Leo Archipello. Ardaleo. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hartling, and thank you to Jerry and John. Councillor, if you could use your mic, please.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if our legal solicitor can say the names that he spoke of first.
Sure.
The legal, please.
The invoices were from Birchall, Wickwire, Bryson. And the second one was from Stewart McKelvey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to better understand the scope of this audit. When I opened it, one thing I looked for right away was a recommendation and then the management response. Well, neither of those were there. And I think you explained to me, or explained to the group, that this is just a piece of what will be a bigger procurement audit. But I guess my question is what is the purpose of this audit then, if there is no recommendation or no management response in it? It was, maybe you can just speak to that a little bit, because the report itself was rather thin, I will say. I mean, it was looking at 4 transactions, but it didn't, like, for example, in the capital audit, it talked about documentation. There's no reference to, efforts to obtain documentation. There's comments on what people said. There's no reference to whether documentation exists or not to support comments that were made. I think that would have made the report somewhat more robust. So I'm curious about, your approach in this.
Absolutely. We were intentionally wanted this to be to the point, get in, get out, get it done. If at any point in any of my audits I can't find the documentation I need, that's when you're going to hear about documentation. If you just see conclusions, that's because I could get all the documentation I needed, and then I can conclude from that. So in this case, all the information was there for each of these transactions. There was nothing that was missing. There was nothing that hadn't been completed. It just, this is what there was. So for instance, let's talk about the speechwriter. So I guess in that case, no, there was no documentation because there was no procurement process undertaken. It was an email to the writer and asking him to come in and help. So there's nothing to look at there. It's didn't follow a competitive procurement process. There was nothing created, and that's my conclusion. In terms of no recommendations, really the only recommendation I could make here is comply with the procurement policy, which I am hesitant to ever make that recommendation because that's a given. Doesn't matter what the policy is, comply with fill in the blank policy is a given. I'm not going to recommend that we do that. If there's something more specific that we need to do in order to comply, in order to your question around documentation, if there's things that aren't being completed and therefore I can't figure out what's happening, I'll make recommendations on that. In this case, it was a simple matter of 4 transactions that were non-compliant. And we will do a broader audit that may uncover some more systemic issues that we can lead to recommendations. But for this one, it comes down to, all I could say is you should comply with the policy. And I think that's a given in our municipality, that people should comply with the policies that govern them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Trying to see the list. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so my second question kind of was about confirming that the Chief of Staff was provided information in writing that authorization was required. So that communication after the June invoice, that was confirmed?
Email that included his approval as a one-time exception of the first one, and a clear statement that you need to get authorization if this happens, before this happens again.
So it's very clear that this information was provided to the Chief of Staff, and then the Chief of Staff proceeded with invoicing and doing another legal invoice, but naming it under a different category. So it's not that the Chief of Staff wasn't aware that authorization was required, but the Chief of Staff, given the evidence here, it looks like made a conscious decision to label it, the legal expense, as something else.
I'm hesitant to speak to what the Chief of Staff knew or did not know. She had an email was sent to her that included an explicit reference to that. Beyond that, I'll leave it.
Okay. And was there any evidence that the Chief of Staff or anyone from the Mayor's office did not have full access to advice from the solicitor, from the CAO, from finance, from procurement? Any reason why they could not have sought that information?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cuddle. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I feel like I'm going to direct this question directly to the solicitor. I just want to understand a little bit, because there are no recommendations. I am doing my best to understand the accountability piece. So just regarding accountability for the transactions that we are looking at today, it is my understanding, and I would encourage, if I'm wrong in this, please let me know. It is my understanding that the mayor requested that his office be separated from the CAO's office, and then thereby assuming that responsibility. So I'm just trying to understand whose role is it to ensure that the mayoral staff comply with all HRM policies, including the municipal code of conduct and all of the other things. If I could get some clarity on that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, through you to members of the committee, I'm not clear if it was at the mayor's request or the CAO at the time, Ms. O'Toole's direction, but you will recall council was copied on that correspondence, which was in and around the same time, frankly, as this first invoice and other things were going on. And at that point, I think the CAO's email is very clear that it's the mayor's responsibility to manage his office, and that there was support. So it's quite a lengthy email. It goes through all of those sorts of things in terms of separating it out and having it stood up as its own business unit, subject to, accountability to council, right? through the budget process and otherwise.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hertling. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I wanted to ask about the speech piece. Andrew, from your report there and from answers to question, am I correct in understanding that was set up basically just by an email of, hey, come help us write the speech, and that was the extent of that?
Yes, that is as I understand it.
Okay. In the report, it references that the mayor's office went to this particular speechwriter because of a past history of working with Mayor Savage. I recall former Mayor Savage saying to media when the speech story was kind of a fresh thing a couple of months ago that he had not contracted for speeches in the past, that the state of the municipality was prepared by him and his then chief of staff. Did we verify that?
No, we didn't verify that. From my perspective, what I was looking for and the reason it's referenced in here is that was the explanation that the mayor's office provided to us. That was why they thought it was reasonable for them to go and get this speechwriter. At the end of the day, I don't feel that was legitimate. Whether or not the previous mayor used this speechwriter isn't actually relevant here. It's just a matter of that just if he had or had not, that still doesn't justify not using a procurement approach, a competitive procurement approach.
So from your perspective, it's kind of just whether that's true or not is irrelevant to the work that you did. Is that fair?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Okay, that knocks that off. I think I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew, so you had commented when you first engaged in this that you wanted your staff to get in, get it done, and get out. I don't know. I need to understand why you felt. I've never heard that kind of, I guess, description of auditing. Auditing, I always understood, was a slow process. You very detailed, very meticulous, go through everything, etc. So I need some help understanding that. The second part of my question is back to it being referred to a police force. Just sort of wondering how often are these kinds of municipal audits, I guess, referred to a police agency? And I need to understand a little more about what would trigger that. What would be some of the things that would be within the outcome that would leave you feeling concerned and referring it to a police force?
Okay, I'll start with why we want it to be in and out. The nature of the audit, I think I would say simply the volume of people who are sitting in the back row behind me and the number of you who are sitting in front of me. I didn't want this issue to become a public issue before I'd completed my audit. So the sooner I could get it done, the sooner we'd have an opportunity to put our report out in front of all of you and speak to facts. I didn't want the mayor's office getting questions about something that was in process that he wouldn't be able to speak to. So we were focused on the 4 transactions that we had some concerns had been brought to us about, and we focused on getting them done. Now, that said, we still did a full audit. We did not cut any corners on it. We just simply didn't do as broad an audit as we might usually do. But each of those 4 transactions received the same attention that they always would, as did our report. It's brief, but it has been prepared exactly as any audit report that I do would be done. As for the police, I can't really speak to how often this might have happened. I'm not aware of it in a previous municipal auditor general's audit, but I'm only intimately aware of the last 2.5 years. And I can't explicitly say, well, this or this or this is what would lead to that happening. It's a professional judgment for me of where things move potentially past non-compliant into an area where I'm not qualified to say whether something is illegal or not illegal. And when we reach that, when I get to that point where I'm like, I'm not sure, as a CPA and as an employee of the municipality, I feel it's my responsibility to pass that along to somebody who is qualified to make that assessment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Andrew, I'm wondering, I think when you spoke about the RCMP before, excuse me, you said a couple things were referred. Can you be clear with us which two things were referred to HRP and onto RCMP?
So I shared my concerns generally with them and allow them to then take what they see fit and do an investigation on. I am not aware of what specific areas they may be investigating, and I don't really want to be involved in that. So that's a question best for them. I referred the overall concerns at a general level.
Okay, so your whole audit, this whole thing was passed on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I think this question is for Jerry. If we had these types of non-compliance with established procedures in another business unit, how would we handle the HR piece of this? And maybe it's more of an HR question, but perhaps it's more of a finance question as well in terms of, whether it's the training piece, but maybe it's an HR question.
Thank you. So, typically there would be some hard conversations had if there was with one person and that was continually non-compliant with policy, that would certainly be brought to the manager or the supervisor of that person. We would look at other things such as maybe, cutting spending authority or signing authority, some additional training. But again, it goes to the seriousness. If it was acting in behalf of the municipality, could be some training pieces. If it was done personally, would be different. And it could go to the Auditor General. It could be reported to the police.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Steele. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This certainly feels at this point that this is much more than just a lessons learned kind of moment. This feels much more serious, kind of given the context. There were clear violations of procurement policy, and even after information was shared. I'm wondering around the HR component of this, just given the seriousness of this, if we might go in camera to discuss what our options are here for next steps.
We'll just get our solicitor's advice on in camera.
Well, I can tell you the general specifics, but if you want to drill down into an individual, that would be an in-camera conversation.
I think we're kind of past the point of general at this point, and sure. I think as a council, we need to clearly understand our options around this HR issue.
Sure, if whatever, yeah.
So I move to go in camera.
So just before we go in camera, or a vote to go in camera, I would like to be able to finish some of the public questions, please, because we don't want to do the yo-yo back and forth. Councillor Austin is on the board for a question, and with the indulgence of everyone, I also have a question.
But I will just share, I mean, The general approach is the same in any well-run organization like ours, which is coaching, which leads to a performance letter, potentially discipline, including suspension up to including termination. That's like any other organization. And so.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I wanted to ask about like the HRM, kind of the broader bureaucracy's response here. Like the AG's report is now done. So presumably it lands with all of us to think about this, but it would also land with the CEO. I'm just wondering, are there next steps for the broader kind of HRM as to what happens now?
That may be the subject of the discussion in camera, or we would have our acting CAO, if you would like to respond to that. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Brad Anguish, acting CAO. Well, yes, there will be. I'm receiving the auditor's report here today, like you are. I'm hearing his advice and what he covered and what he didn't cover. And so I need to take that away and discuss next steps. I'm also aware there is an ongoing police investigation, which I also have to take into consideration. But yes, there are more steps to cover here that I can be sure of. What exactly they are, I need some time to develop those in light of the situation. Other than that, I assume your question may be more specific to a personnel or matter, in which case I'm glad to discuss that.
I was meaning it broad, Brad, because honestly, I don't know what happens next.
Fair enough. I can assure you there's more next steps. Certainly for my role in this, when I became aware of the situation, I raised my concern with the mayor's office. I provided advice, and we are here where we are today. Certainly once I became aware of the auditor's investigation, it did not make sense for me to duplicate that effort. And of course, now I'm aware of a police investigation, so I need to take time to understand what the next steps are. But here we are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor White?
Yes, my question would be for CIO or solicitor. With the mayor's staff being completely under the mayor now, it's not clear to me how council or staff would be able to change that back to the way it was before. Can you speak to that?
So as Madam Chair, through you to the committee, as I think everyone's well aware, the council has two employees, the Auditor General and the CAO. Employees are all under the direction and leadership of the CAO, except we're delegated. And so the CAO has delegated authority for the management, but ultimately that's a delegation that can be reviewed or limited if necessary. But at this point, the advice and where it sits rests with the supervisor of employees, which for the mayor's office is the mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Mayor Fillmore.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of quick things that have come up, and maybe it's just easier for me to answer them so that they're not hanging questions out there in the world. There was a discussion about how a legal item was categorized in the financial portal. This is what I've learned is this is there are some drop-down menus that the person entering are presented with, and in the case of the item being entered as other goods and services, I think it was, the reason was that the legal option was not available in the portal that my office had access to, and learning later in conversations with staff that we learned that should have been an indicator that we weren't supposed to be procuring legal services that way. So it wasn't like anybody chose not to enter legal. It simply wasn't an option in that particular interface. And subsequent to that, we learned that that's why because legal procurement goes through legal services. So I just wanted you to understand that. Someone asked about who's gotten training. So it's the chief of staff, and it's also the director of operations in the mayor's office. They've undergone some procurement training now. And then finally, Madam Chair, just on the question of going in camera, this has been an open and transparent process. As I've said, I've completely cooperated with the Auditor General. This whole exercise is about openness and transparency. I think the purpose of this meeting is to inform the public as to what these transactions were, not retreat into closed door discussions. I think this deserves to be discussed in the open, and so the residents can understand what the findings are that the Auditor General has made. I think going in camera would run absolutely contrary to the very spirit of the transparency of an audit. And I would unfortunately have to not participate in an in-camera portion of a discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Fillmore. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note this is going in camera would not be to discuss the audit. It would be to discuss our HR options. Our standard practice is that we don't discuss HR issues in public. So I, would not want to have that discussion in public, and I think that we should go in camera, and just to understand what our options are at this point. It's not to discuss the audit. Obviously, the transparency is important. Thank you.
Thank you to Deputy Mayor Cuddle. So, seeing no further names in this moment, if I might ask the AG some questions from the chair, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, for the report. I will share that I was also a little surprised by the lack of evidence that was in the report itself, more the conclusions, what was found and not found. One of the things that you said around the consultant, that the former CAO cited confidentiality as the reason for the alternative procurement eventually. I would think it is, I don't know that any members of council received that report. I think it stayed within the mayor's office. I don't think any of us have read it. But I would think if it was looking at the structure of the mayor's office and if people's positions may be in jeopardy in a restructuring, to me that would make sense that confidentiality could be cited. It might be open-ended, but I would think that might be relevant. Did you ask the former CAO about why confidentiality was listed, or did you interview the previous CAO?
I did have a brief conversation with Ms. O'Toole. And while I will agree that there may have been elements that could have ultimately been considered confidential, I don't believe that in its entirety that was an adequate reason to do the procurement as an alternative procurement and just pick one HR firm consultant and focus only on them. I feel that in the big picture, there was more than enough of this work would not have required any level of confidentiality. And I have all the confidence in the world that other HR firms could keep things confidential as necessary. So I don't believe that was a legitimate explanation. And I didn't delve too deeply into the thinking at the time, no.
Okay. So you didn't read the report to find out if within the substance of the report there was any issue that confidentiality would have been an issue?
We looked at everything that was in the alternative procurement form. It really is as simple as checking a box.
Okay.
To say this is why we're going with an alternative procurement. There's not a great amount of detail there.
Okay. It does seem that there, how do I phrase this? It seems that you may have had evidence that didn't show up in the report. Usually you're very clear. It's black and white. right? It's one thing or it's another, and your recommendations are pretty solid. So you have spoken to why the report is written in the way that it is. I'm not sure that I heard you correctly when you say that a further procurement audit will not address these issues, or they will become part of the future audit that you're looking at.
So in terms of, excuse me, in terms of this report, I feel it is very clear. We looked at 4 transactions. None of them were compliant with policy. That was the objective of the audit. That is the conclusion of the audit. That's very clear.
Okay.
I didn't feel I needed a large amount of additional information to support that, to potentially cloud that conclusion. It is what it is. None of these met the threshold. In terms of the future audit, we are doing a broader HRM-wide procurement audit. The exact scope of that is underway to determine what that will be. I am keeping the mayor's office as an option on that, depending on what we determine our risk areas are, what the additional procurements are at the mayor's office. We're not going to go back and look at these 4 again. We've already concluded on these 4. There's nothing further for them. If there are additional procurements that we feel will add value as sample items in our upcoming audit, then we will consider them.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Members of council, there are no other names on the list. The mayor has stated his position about in camera or not. What is the will of the committee? Is there a motion to go in camera? Deputy Mayor Cuddle. Oh, before we go to the seconder, Councillor Kent, do you have
Yes, thank you.
a point of order, or?
I want to understand a little more from the mayor, if he could, as to why he may not want to participate in the consideration of discussion around HR. It appears to me that that would be a reasonable thing, as the mayor's office, and the mayor is ultimately responsible for the HR complement in his department. And I just want to understand that. I'm wondering if he can help here, now that he knows this is not about the audit. This is about well, no, it's about the audit, but it's around HR. It maybe he considered changing his mind, because I think it's a valuable piece for him to understand going forward. Can't turn a blind eye to it.
A little bit out of step, but Mayor Fillmore, if you would like to respond to the councillor's question.
Just maybe.
Yeah, I can assure you there's no blind eye being turned. I and my staff have been living this for many, many months, and we understand the situation fully. Yeah, it's on. And I don't have a different position than I just stated. This should be a public discussion. It's a public report. The report was generated in the interest of transparency and letting the public know what has happened. And I think we do it a disservice to go in camera, and I'm not comfortable being part of the conversation if we deprive the community from hearing what it is we're discussing.
Thank you, Mayor Fillmore. I will just remind everyone that it is a member of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee that needs to make the motion and second it to go in camera. And I will check with our solicitor, but it is often a matter of just good due diligence to go in camera and ask the AG of anything that should not or would not be in public. If you could just confirm that for me, sir.
That is a common practice.
Thank you so very much. A member of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee, do you wish to make a motion to go in camera? Audit and Finance? Not exercising your due diligence? Okay. Oh, Vice Chair St. Amand, thank you. A seconder, please, from Audit and Finance. Oh, Councillor Cleary, thank you so very much. And just give us a few minutes. All those in favor from Audit and Finance who vote? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now take just a few minutes to get set up for being in camera. Thank you. Councillor Purdy, I apologize. Did you have a point of order or?
No, I just wanted to say I'm
With
with the way the report's written.
Councillor Purdy, maybe when we go back in public, you might want to make your comment.
Okay, I'm not going to be staying for the in camera either.
Okay.
Thank you.
we're ready to come back. Thank you so very much. Thank you everyone for the indulgence while we were in camera. That concludes item 13.1.2 as the in-camera did not result in any motion. Mr. AG, Andrew Arthurton, thank you so very much for the work that you do on behalf of HRM. We appreciate it. Thank you. So moving on to item 13.2, our staff reports, 13.2.1, the Cogswell Water Feature Budget Transfer. Now, while there is no presentation for this report, I think we might wait a moment. Someone might be coming up from the Major Projects Office to answer any questions should we have them. But where we just came back from in camera, it might take them a moment. In the meantime, if a member of Audit and Finance would like to put the motion on the floor, we could do that. And then if there's any questions that arise. Councillor Cleary, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to put the motion on the floor that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council transfer 2.1 million of the fountain budget from Cogswell account CT 00000007 to Granville Park Water Feature CP 2600001 to proceed with the design build approach for a water spray pad in Granville Park targeting construction in 2027. And as we're waiting for staff to come up, I appreciate in the short report, it looks at some value engineering, some creative contracting, looking at the bathroom and in bringing the bathroom stuff into the fountain project, see if we can get a better price, which reduced it substantially by several hundreds of thousands of dollars. I guess my only question as I see Ms. Wilkinson, thank you, approaching is for the so-called water spray pad, how different will it be from the original design in terms of the actual design changes? Because I understand the cooling aspect is still going to be in there. Is it the fountainy part that's no longer there? Like what is the change that's been able to happen that made the price come down?
So regarding the fountain scope, we haven't fully designed it yet. So what we're recommending here is that we transfer the money from the Cogswell project to the Parks and Recreation budget, at which time the Parks team will do a design build tender to redesign the fountain to that budget specifically.
Okay, so the concept is still there. The features, some of them may be scaled down or eliminated, but the overall idea is still going forward. It's just obviously with the tender coming in at such a high price, try to get that down within that now 2.8, I think it was.
Yes, so the intention at this time would be to design to the budget envelope we have. The original fountain design included a couple different components. We had some concrete features as well as light components and different types of jets. And so what we're envisioning is you just get a much simpler design. We've referenced just in conversation, similar to what's down in front of Bishop's Landing. So kind of that sort of splash pad interactive environment. So just kind of a more simpler approach. What that looks like exactly is still to be determined. That would go through that, again, that design build approach.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the answers.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. I see no other, Councillor White, and my apologies. Welcome, Alora Wilkinson. Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alora, for engaging my questions on email. I just want to, I don't think this should be a splash pad as we've discussed. It should be as fountain-like as possible. So will it be something that's on all the time when it's there, or you have to like press a button to make it happen?
Through the chair to the councillor. So yes, as we discussed earlier this morning, the intention is still that the fountain design will be appropriate for the rest of the aesthetic approach to Granville Park and its prominence in the Cogswell space. And so the intention is not, I know the terminology of a water feature, a splash pad, a children's pad, they're all kind of vague. So we understand the confusion. The intention is still very much an all ages facility, not a children's water park in the intention. How that looks exactly, again, still to be determined, but I think the intention at this time is it is that sort of phased water component, which again will be worked through in the design, but not kind of something you turn on and turn off, but more a feature that is turned on for the summer and is on kind of a rolling schedule for the water component.
Okay, thank you very much. I just noticed we have a couple other fountains and they're behind a cage. I'm just really looking forward to a fountain that people can sit and linger at. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. No further questions on the board. Oh, our CFO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment for context here, because, you know, with the capital budget audit that was here before, there was some recommendations around prioritization. This is a great case of, you know, reprioritization of funding and in a transparent process, bringing it back to council for approval. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Jerry. Seeing no further names on the list, we'll call for the question. Yes, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 13.2.2, which is our investment activities for the quarter ending March 31st, 2026. Again, we do not have a presentation, but Erin McLean, Deputy Treasurer, will be available to answer any questions. And I think I also see Vicky here. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward the staff report dated June 15, 2026 to Halifax Regional Council as an information item.
Vice Chair St. Amand, thank you so very much. Councillor Cleary?
So I'll maybe just say the same question I've asked the last couple times. The quarterly reports for investments have come. And, you know, it's outside of our control. Obviously, the interest rate environment is such that the returns and the cash amounts are such that the returns are less than budgeted. We're off by a few $1 million now. And so how are we, because this was the quarter ended at the end of our budget year, does that revise anything for the budget? Is it more or less the same? Did we account for that, or are we going to restate that? It's going to be a little bit lower than it was when we stated it the first time.
Aaron McLean, Deputy Treasurer, through you, Madam Chair, to the Councillor. Great question. What we do is we form the budget back in September. So you will see this is quite a bit reduced from the budget from the previous fiscal year. So you are correct that the operating interest for this last quarter was lower than what we budgeted. You will see, I've run the numbers already for Q1. We're going to be very close to what we budgeted for the new fiscal year. And it's primarily as a result of the operating cash that's lower than what we expected. You'll see that in graph C that it's come down quite a bit from previous years. That's been a little bit more right size so far right now in the first quarter. And so we're tracking very close to budget right now.
Yeah, I remember, well, coming out of COVID especially, we had loads and loads of cash on hand all the time with all the money that was coming to us from the feds and the province and everyone else, and all the money we weren't spending for short periods of time. And I also don't want to leave the impression that we're mismanaging. If you look at the graphs and the chart that shows our performance versus our benchmarks, we're still at or performing above those benchmarks. So, the amount of cash in the interest rate environment are the causes. It's not anything that you guys aren't doing well. I want to restate that.
Yeah, I actually appreciate you bringing that up. That's a very important point. We have made a few changes to the investment policy going forward, which I think will provide some beneficial returns to the portfolio. Maybe small basis points increases, but something that we can look at as well. But you are correct. We're achieving our goal versus the budget versus our benchmark quite substantially. It's just the operating cash levels have been a little bit lower due to recent outgoing expenses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. There are no other names on the list. We'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you, Aaron. Our next item on the agenda is motions. There are none. In camera, we have done. There are no added items. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion? Nope. The date of our next meeting is August 12th, 2026. And I do apologize that in a 3-hour meeting, I did not give anybody a break. So August 12th, I'll remember a bio break if our meeting goes long. So August 12th, 2026. And now a motion to adjourn, please. Everybody was in. We'll give it to Councillor Gillis. Thank you. We are adjourned.